There's something your brain does when it realizes it's been watched for a long time without knowing it. It's not panic, not immediately. It's more like a cold understanding that settles in the back of your skull, a slow, quiet shift in how you see everything that came before. Every window you sat near, every night you left the porch light off, every morning you walked down to the creek without your phone. All of it replayed, but with one new detail. My name is Daniel. In the fall of 2019, I moved alone to a rented property in the mountains of rural Montana. I was 34 years old, freshly divorced, and I genuinely believed that solitude would fix something inside me. I was wrong about a lot of things that year, but the worst thing I was wrong about was the idea that I was alone.
The property was about 12 miles from the nearest town, a place called Gravel Creek, that had one gas station, a diner that closed at 6, and maybe 400 people if you were being generous. The cabin itself was small, one bedroom, a main living space, a bathroom that smelled like old pine and iron. There was a wood stove I figured out how to use on my third night when the temperature dropped to 9 degrees and I nearly froze sitting on the floor eating canned soup. I'm not going to romanticize it. The first 2 weeks were genuinely difficult. I missed noise. I missed the specific ambient hum of a city. Traffic, voices, the occasional siren. Out there, the silence had texture, weight. But I adjusted. I got into a routine. Up at 7, coffee, a walk down to the creek, maybe a mile each way, back by 9, work remotely until 2 or 3, evenings on the porch with a book. The nearest neighbor was a man named Walt, a retired electrician who lived about a half-mile up the road. He checked in on me the first week, showed up with a bottle of whiskey and a detailed explanation of which roads flooded in November. I liked him immediately. He told me almost offhand that the previous tenant had left in a hurry. Didn't say much else about it. I didn't push. I wish I had. The first thing I noticed, and I didn't think anything of it at the time, was the dog. I didn't own a dog, but about 10 days into my time there, I started seeing tracks on the south side of the property. Big, wide-set prints in the mud near the tree line. I assumed a stray, maybe a wolf or a large coyote. They were common up there. But the tracks were always in the same place, along the same path, always parallel to my morning route to the creek. I told myself it was nothing. Later, I'd realized those weren't animal tracks.
It started with small things that didn't connect until they did. My firewood was stacked against the east wall of the cabin. Every few days, I'd go out and bring in an armload. About 3 weeks in, I noticed the stack had shifted slightly. A few logs that I'd left on the right side of the pile had moved to the left. Not dramatically, just reorganized. Neatly, actually. I assumed I'd done it and forgotten. That's the thing about living alone. There's no one to verify your memory against. You start second-guessing yourself constantly. Then one Thursday evening, I came in from the porch and found mud on the floor near the back door. Small boot prints. Half a track, really, just inside the threshold. The door had been unlocked. I stared at them for a long time. I told myself it was mine, but I'd been wearing moccasins that evening, and the print was narrow, longer than my foot. I didn't sleep well that night. The next morning, I walked the perimeter of the property. Nothing looked disturbed. The tree line was still. I stood at the south edge for a while, looking into the pines, and thought I smelled cigarette smoke. Faint, old, like someone had been there hours before. I called Walt that afternoon. Didn't mention the boot print. I still wasn't ready to say it out loud. I just asked him casually if there were other people around the area, hikers maybe, anyone who came through. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "There's a man who walks these woods, has for years. Locals know him. He's not dangerous, they say, just particular." I asked what he meant by particular. Walt said, "He gets attached to places. Used to stay in a deer blind about 200 yards from your property. People have asked him to move along before." I asked if he had a name. Walt said people called him Heron. He didn't know why. That night I sat on the porch later than usual, facing the trees. I told myself I was being rational. I told myself this was nothing. At 11:14 p.m., I know the time because I checked my phone, I saw a light in the trees. Not a flashlight, smaller. A phone screen maybe, or a lighter. Just a brief, pale flicker between the pines about 150 yards out. It was there for maybe 4 seconds. Then it was gone. I went inside and locked every door and window. I sat on the floor with my back against the couch and didn't sleep until 4 in the morning. The next day I went to the hardware store in Gravel Creek and bought 2 motion-activated lights, a chain bolt for the back door, and a $30 trail camera I'd seen in a hunting display. I mounted the camera on a pine at the south edge of the property, aimed at the tree line. Then I waited.
The camera was set to take a burst of 3 photos whenever the sensor was triggered. I checked it every morning. The first 2 days, nothing. A deer on night 1, a raccoon on night 2. I almost convinced myself I was being paranoid. On the 3rd night, the camera triggered at 2:07 a.m. I pulled the SD card at sunrise, brought it inside, loaded the files on my laptop. The first photo was dark, just the edge of the tree line, the motion sensor catching a shadow. The second photo was him. He was standing about 30 feet from the camera, tall, thin, wearing a dark jacket, work boots, a wool cap pulled low. He was looking directly at the cabin, not moving, just standing there, looking. The third photo, he was gone. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time.
The phone line.
The next morning, I drove to the county sheriff's office in Milland, the bigger town, about 30 miles away. I brought my laptop with the photos. The deputy who sat with me was a woman named Caraway. She was thorough in a way the phone deputy hadn't been. She looked at the photos carefully, asked me to walk her through the timeline, took notes by hand. When I got to the part about the previous tenant, she looked up. She said, "We had a report from use his name, had a prior incident in another county, a different cabin, a different man living alone. That case had escalated. They arrested him 4 days later at a truck stop off Route 2. He had my address written on a piece of paper in his jacket pocket. He had a photograph of me, taken from a distance through the trees, folded carefully in his wallet. He'd been watching me for at least 7 weeks. During those 7 weeks, I had walked to the creek 49 times. I had sat on that porch in the dark dozens of nights thinking I was alone. Every single time, he was there.
I didn't go back to the cabin after that. I broke the lease. The landlord didn't fight me on it. I think he understood. I spent a few months at my sister's place in Boise, slept badly for a long time, did the usual things you do when something like this happens: therapy, new locks, checking over my shoulder. The checking over your shoulder never really stops. It just becomes quieter, a lower register of wariness that you carry everywhere. What I think about most, even now, isn't the photos or the notebook or the arrest. It's those mornings at the creek. The way the light came through the pines around 8 a.m., that specific cold autumn light. The sound of the water over the rocks, how completely peaceful it felt. I was genuinely happy in those moments. I remember thinking, more than once, that the solitude was working, that I was healing. He was 20 feet away in those moments, behind a tree, writing it down. There's nothing I could have done differently in those mornings. I didn't know, but knowing doesn't change the feeling of it. If you're living alone somewhere remote, and I say this not to frighten you, but because I wish someone had said it to me, trust the small things that feel wrong: the reorganized woodpile, the smell that shouldn't be there, the dog tracks that are too consistent. Your instincts aren't nothing. Mine were trying to tell me for weeks before I listened. If this story is something you've experienced in a similar way, or if you have your own, I read everything you send. The link to reach me is in the description. Take care of yourselves and each other.